All right, welcome everyone to the Solana Foundation Validator discussion, May 9th, 2024. Today we're going to do the normal updates, talk about an educational workshop, some reminders from upcoming events around Breakpoint, Block Zero, and the StakePoint event presented by Mainnet. And then we'll have some time to talk about SIMD 96, changing from 50% burn of priority fees to 100% of priority fees going to validators. And then any other topics people want to bring up. Here we go. So first and foremost, 1.17.33 is currently recommended for mainnet beta. This includes some congestion fixes, or I should say improvements to congestion. So if you have not upgraded yet, recommend doing so. The details of the changes are in the release notes, but they should all be congestion focused. If you are participating in SFDP, please upgrade by epoch 6.15. It's a minimum required version now in SFDP. For testnet, 1.18.12 is currently still recommended. There should be a release of 1.18.13 relatively soon. I don't know exactly when that's coming out, but I would expect it within a week. Once that's out and it's looking good on testnet and perhaps on mainnet, if some small percentage of stake tries it, we'll begin the upgrade and downgrade cycle on testnet. So look out for that 1.18 new release and potentially doing the normal upgrade and downgrade cycle on testnet in order to bring 1.18 to mainnet. Any question about either of those?
Yeah, I have just a quick question. That link shows the Agave repo. I'm still cloning the Solana Labs repo. Is there any reason we should be using that mirror, or should we all be switching over to Agave?
It's probably a good idea to switch over to Agave whenever it's convenient for you. I believe in the 2.0 release, the Solana install will not work anymore. So the sooner the better.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right. Any other thoughts, questions? Cool. Moving on. All right. Next educational workshop. The original plan was to do a workshop on firewalling. I didn't feel like I was the best resource for that. We might still do that topic in the future, but haven't found yet the right person to run it. I got a suggestion from Chris from Chainflow to do the life cycle of a transaction, which I thought would be pretty useful. So I'm going to do that one on Monday, May 13th, 1700 UTC. If you have suggestions for future workshops, let me know. I think, the more ideas from the community, the better. Any other thoughts on that? Otherwise, we'll move on. Okay, so upcoming events. Breakpoint is happening in September this time instead of November. So September 20th is Breakpoint. Around Breakpoint, there will be two validator-specific or validator-related events. The first one is Block Zero. Block Zero happened for the first time last year at Breakpoint, and they are running Block Zero again. Thank you very much to the organizers, Brian, Chris, the Mainnet team, others I'm probably forgetting, but really awesome event last year, and I'm expecting an awesome event this year as well. So Block Zero happening before Breakpoint, September 18th in Singapore. Save the date. And I think Chris is on the call if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add is that we met last week with the Breakpoint organizers to get a feel for the venue, and we started to sketch out an agenda. So I'd say probably in like the next week or two, we'll be sending out the registration link for people to sign up. And then shortly after that, or in parallel, we'll send out a form if anybody wants to suggest a topic for a talk. And then also we'll be looking for sponsors pretty soon too. So stay tuned for all that probably in the next couple of weeks.
There's a question about information on event details. I don't know if you want to add anything there, but it sounds like you kind of covered it.
Anything in particular in terms of details? We'll have a planning document shared soon. We're starting to form that up, but it's in a skeleton mode right now. So once we have some more information, we'll have a document that has all the details, logistics, and agenda. The one thing I would say is that we're looking for some feedback on the agenda. Last year we did like roundtable discussion workshops in the morning and then talks in the afternoon. This year we're thinking about doing talks in the morning, and then we'd like to keep the afternoon peer-to-peer, so it's not just people from a stage talking to the audience all day. And we're trying to figure out the best way to do that. So if anybody has some ideas on how to do that or has been at other conferences where that's worked well, please reach out. You could reach out to me. I'd love to hear some ideas on how we can do that. So it's, talks in the morning and then more interactive in the afternoon.
Oops. Yeah, and it looks like Brian also shared the Luma link to sign up for Block Zero. I didn't realize that was already up. So go ahead and sign up now if you're planning to attend. Cool. All right, another event that will happen the day after Block Zero is StakePoint, which is presented by Marinade. It's a single-day conference on staking. The Luma link is here. I'll drop it in the chat, but I think Brandon is on the call to give a little more details about that as well.
Yeah, Jim, thanks for having me. Had a chance to participate in last year's out in Amsterdam, and it was an awesome experience. And got a chance to see the Singapore venue this year last week on that same call Chris mentioned, and it's pretty sweet venue. So really excited to host people. So StakePoint's going to be a little different than last year. We're going to kind of attract more of an institutional audience for this one. I think being in Singapore, that gives us an opportunity to do that. So yeah, the Luma's there. Thank you, Tim. And really at this time, I think we're just feeling out validators who would like to participate on a panel or a co-sponsor. So check the Luma link out and reach out to us if you want to participate. And I'll also be DMing a lot of you too to feel you out on potential topics and things like that. So really excited to get this going.
Cool. Thank you, Brandon. Any questions on StakePoint? Okay, just a recap. Yeah, there was a question in chat about the dates overlapping. I thought the same thing. It's a time zone issue with Luma. So it looks like StakePoint is on the 18th. It's actually on the 19th, and it's mentioned in the body of the event. Yeah, so recap of timeline. The 18th is Block Zero. The 19th is StakePoint, and the 20th is the first official day of Breakpoint. So none of these events should overlap. All right. Switching gears, SIMD 96, for those who are not familiar, is a proposal to change priority fees and change how priority fees are distributed. So currently 50% of the priority fee goes to the identity count of the validator who built that block, and 50% of the priority fee is burned. There's a proposal up right now on the forums to change that to 100% of the priority fee going to the validator rather than having any of it be burned. The proposal and SIMD are here. I will link it in the chat. But yeah, I wanted to open up the floor for people to discuss. One other thing I want to add, just as a bit of clarity, I noticed some talk on Twitter. Well, one post in particular that sort of misrepresented this, so I just want to make it crystal clear. SIMD 96 is only changing priority fees. Signatures for blocks will not be changed. So 50% of fees from signatures will still be burned and 50% will go to the validator. This is only for priority fees. Just call that out. But yeah, anybody on the call want to discuss as far as what their feelings on this proposal are, any more details on it? I can kind of take a stab, but want to hear from the community.
Yeah, so what is the percentage of, I guess, those priority fees from a, I guess, Lamport perspective versus the TX fees?
Sorry, can you repeat that one more time?
Yeah. So in terms of volume, how will this affect is the priority fees a lot more than the land port fees would be on the latter of what you had just talked about?
Yeah, so currently priority fees are more. I don't have hard numbers on how much more, but that's also dependent on the market, right? If there's more congestion in the network, priority fees are going to be higher potentially, and different when they are lower. It looks like Santetsu has better data on that. So go ahead, Zan.
Fantastic. Thanks.
Yeah, I actually have, I collect and have all the fees earned by every validator and every epoch from going back to Genesis. And that includes the block fees and the priority fees. So I can look at a particular validator and tell you their specific numbers. But I think generally validators earn roughly the same according to their stake level, modulus the differences that have happened recently with firewalling rules, potentially increasing fees for some over others. But if I could, I think that the percentage is roughly the same for everybody. And if I could just do a quick bit of math, in Epic 610, the block fees divided by the priority, it's so about 90% of fees are priority fees versus the regular signature fees or block fees that are paid. That's what I'm seeing when I look at Epic 610 for my validator. And so I think that regardless of the specific value, priority fees are the vast majority of fees paid. And so the increase to 100% from 50% will be a majorly significant change in the priority fees earned by validators. It'll roughly double it. It'll go from, a double it minus 10%. So it'll be like 90% more than they are now.
Do we have like a sheer volume of all the validators combined, just so we can understand from a deflationary standpoint?
Sorry, can you ask what are you specific? What's a share volume? What are you asking for?
Do we have like a complete volume of all the validators combined on, let's just take an average of the last 10 epochs and see?
I have that data. I'm happy to post it. I can't get it right now because I have to.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. Thanks.
I can do that. I can do that for every epic. I have it all. So I will do that and I'll post it in the forum for people to look at. I mean the Discord discussion forum for people to look at.
Thanks, Ed. I really appreciate that.
Sure. I mean, you have to trust my numbers.
No, that's fine. Yeah, I mean, it's nice to have someone already.
I mean, anyone can gather this information. If you can get historical looks at blocks, the fees are recorded in there, but you have to actually extract all that, and verifying it is not easy. So if you trust me, I'll provide the data.
I trust you.
Yeah, Michael, go ahead.
I just want to add on the whole, because this is also just generally coming up in conversation, the kind of deflationary standpoint or emissions kind of comment, that priority fees have only existed for ballpark maybe 100, 150 epochs. A year ago, priority fees didn't exist, right? Which means there were also no priority fees being burned a year ago. So removing the burn from priority fees is really just a return to the economics the way they have been for multiple years. So yeah, priority fees being burned is actually more of the anomaly than not being burned. So looking at it as a reduction in deflation, while in some way kind of true, is also not that relevant if you look at the size of priority fees relative to staking rewards and inflation. It's still a lot less.
Yeah, Chris, go ahead.
Does anyone know why the decision was made to burn 50% at the beginning?
I think the original decision was just that's what signature fees are doing, so that's what priority fees are doing. I don't think the original intent was super thought out, because priority fees were not really used very heavily at that point, not used at all, and didn't have huge adoption once they started.
Right, makes sense. And then Zan, you said something at the beginning. You said something about like they're the same for everybody with the same amount of stake, something like that. I missed what you said there.
Yeah, that's
say it
my
again?
In the brief service I've done, I've looked at priority fees for various validators just out of curiosity. And I think, and if you look at, for example, Solana Compass has a website where you can look at individual validators' fees. Generally, I think that modulus random happenstance, most validators are going to stay within roughly the same range of fees per stake. So if you have 1,000 stake, you're going to make so much. If you have 100,000, you're going to make so much. And whoever it is that has 100,000 stake doesn't matter. They're roughly going to make about the same priority fees.
Got it. Yeah, I thought that's what you're saying. Thanks for clarifying.
There was
We should all be competing. We should all be competing to find the best ways to get priority fees. That's our jobs, like providing, capturing the best transactions and packing the blocks with the best possible priority fees is what we're supposed to be doing. And some validators over time are probably going to get better at that as they have more sophisticated techniques for doing it.
There was a question that Brian had earlier about motivation for SIMD 96. I think the motivation stated in the doc was that you could always make a side deal with a validator. And Jito is an example of something that's like a side deal where you can pay a lower fee or pay a fee that doesn't get burned 50%. But more debate about the motivation would be valuable, I think. Yeah, Michael, go ahead.
So I was just looking at some numbers on my validator just to get an idea for the relation of block fees overall relative to staking rewards. And based off some quick kind of napkin math, it looks like all block rewards, including priority fees, are equivalent to basically charging about a 3.5% commission on staking rewards. Or another way of saying that is that inflation is 30 times higher in kind of issuance than all block fees combined. That's after burn, obviously. So let's say it's 15 times if we go to 100% priority fees, ignoring the base for a minute. So in theory, that's like, 1/15th reduction of staking rewards. So if there's about 180, 190,000 SOL in inflation rewards created every epoch, which is somewhere in that ballpark, then 1/15th of that is something like 10 or 15,000 SOL in block rewards. And half of that would be the amount that is no longer being burned. So 7,500 SOL is very roughly in that ballpark relative to the 180,000 in staking rewards being created. So it is an impact, but it's much smaller and less significant than inflation rewards. Because remember, with inflation rewards, validators generally are taking a single-digit commission. So the number we're looking at is a single-digit commission versus 100% of block rewards that validators are usually keeping.
Yeah, so to answer Max's most recent question in the chat, I mean, it's roughly what we're talking about here is, in my calculations, about 3% less deflation than we're currently experiencing with the priority fee burn. So the priority fees being burned are roughly about 3% of the overall SOL in existence is getting burned every epoch by priority fees, and that'll stop happening. Do you care about 3%? I don't know. That's for you to decide.
Yeah, that's the same number I had.
Yeah, Overclock, go ahead.
Hey, so one thing that I've been concerned about is we do have like a small subset of validators that started sharing fee rewards. And so when we start earning a lot more priority fee rewards, it'll become like a much bigger competitive advantage to share more of these block rewards. But the thing is, most validators doing this are using these off-chain mechanisms to redistribute the rewards. But I haven't gotten any real legal advice on this, but my understanding is that there might be more of a legal gray zone in countries like the US to distribute rewards in this way. And so my worry is that validators in certain countries would be at this disadvantage now by having to maybe try to operate in this gray zone or just not compete by sharing priority fee rewards until there's like a good way of distributing those in protocol.
I will say there's a draft SIMD on this, SIMD 123, I believe, that talks about distributing block rewards, but it's still pretty early stages. If you're interested, I'd suggest taking a look. I'll share it here.
So like one calculation I also did was essentially sharing 100% of your priority fee rewards after this goes into place. That big of a difference in APY of sharing your 100% of those rewards is basically equivalent to 20% difference in inflation commission, which is a pretty massive difference and like a huge advantage potentially for some validators who are, I guess, more okay with doing that.
Yeah, Brian, you had a comment?
Yeah, this is Brian from Jito. I just want to echo what Overclock said, that I think independent of whether there are legal concerns or not, that this is a major revenue stream and there should be some in protocol or easily kind of programmatic way for these to be distributed as operators see fit, because it's such a major factor. Obviously, this didn't exist for historical reasons because it wasn't a major driver and it was the simplest path forward. But I think, there's a lot of debate about whether 123, SIMD 123 is the right structure or not last week. I don't feel strongly about the mechanism for distribution, but I think there's also like potential synergies with how Jito rewards are distributed. But regardless, I think we have, it sounds like at least 5 months before SIMD 96 would go live, since it's gated by version 2.0 being on mainnet. But in that time, that this should be a catalyst for us to focus on how we do have a programmatic distribution mechanism, because if not, then there could be inequities in sophistication in just how it's treated across the validator set. And so I think a way for everyone to do this easily is an important thing for the cluster.
It's also a ton of extra traffic too. Like, I mean, if we have 1,000 validators that want to redistribute fees to all of their stakers, it just seems kind of crazy in that regard. But I don't know. Maybe there are better ways of doing it.
Yeah, Michael, go ahead.
I just wanted to address Overclock's points. The first one was that sharing 100% of block rewards would be the same as a 20% change in staking commission. From the numbers Dan and I were just discussing, at the moment it would be about a 3 to 4% change, and then after SIMD 96 passes it would be about a 6 or 7% change. So just to put that into a different context, on the point of it being a problem for US validators, I think that's kind of a general point that speaks to kind of the regulatory framework in the US, and I'm not sure that it's really helpful to gate feature development based on individual jurisdictions, and I think that's something that every validator needs to determine where they're operating and what their kind of requirements are, which will be different in every country, not just in the US. But I don't think it would be a good idea to start saying that, okay, well, this is hard to implement, or it affects validators in this jurisdiction disproportionately, and then we kind of have like a kind of competition commission or tribunal that says, well, we can't do this because even though it's like good for competition, it hampers these people or something like that.
That's fair. I mean, US validators that care can just vote against it, I guess, if they care.
I think one thing I would add is that I'm not sure that it's necessarily the jurisdiction of where the validator operates. It might be the fact that it could make it difficult for any validator in any jurisdiction to potentially provide service to US-based delegators. So that might be another way to think about looking at it. And if that were the case, then it could be a concern across the board, no matter where anybody's operating, maybe not just, dependent on where the validator is operating itself. But again, I mean, that's just another potential perspective. And it would probably be helpful for anybody concerned to get some good advice from people who really know about this stuff.
And that's not different at the moment, right? Like, it's even if you want to share your burnt priority fees now, like the 50% you have left over, it's still the same concern. So this doesn't really change that.
It's the same, but like just there's more of a need to share those fees if if you have more fees to share, then it makes a bigger competitive difference. That's only a concern, I guess.
Yeah, Brian, go ahead.
Brian, me?
Yeah, sorry, Brian Long.
Poor Brian's on the call. I completely agree with overclock. It is an issue, though, that's well outside the US. Nonetheless, is probably out of scope for this SIMD. So I completely agree with you, but I think we're probably off topic. But all valid points for sure. The question I've got actually goes back to for the signature fees and the burning 50%. There's a security aspect to that. The original idea was to prevent validators from engaging in any kind of an economic manipulation of fees or what's included in a block. And I wonder why those same security concerns do not apply to priority fees, because I would think they should. But maybe somebody on the call can actually articulate what that economic attack looks like, and then maybe we can make a more informed decision about whether or not that applies to priority fees too.
I think that was relevant when there was a congestion mechanism in place, and validators could increase the size of the signature, the lamperts per signature, by stuffing blocks with lots and lots of transactions, creating artificial congestion, and then the congestion mechanism would kick in and increase the lamperts per signature and then increase fees. But that, I don't even know if that mechanism is even, I don't know if it got excised from the code or if it's there and just used. I'm not even sure.
Right.
So I don't think it's priority fees in any case. So that particular is relevant for priority fees.
What you just described is exactly how it would work for priority fees, but it would be on an account specific basis. So I could, for example, I could start to stuff transactions for myself that maybe affect just the Radium program or just a specific DeFi program, in an effort to force up the minimum fees, the priority fees that people expect to pay. And so I mean, that my gut's telling me right now that we probably would need to spend more time. I would need to spend more time understanding that particular kind of attack. Because if it was relevant before, it may still be relevant today.
Oh, yeah, Ryan, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess for that specific attack, would then taking a smaller percentage, like 2 or 5%, be enough to dissuade that attack? Versus right now it's set at 50. Maybe if it's set at 0, you have an attack vector. But if it's a few percent, then there's not that incentive to try to game it.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Well, let's hear from Sammy.
Go ahead.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay, yeah. So from my understanding, as long as it's more profitable for validators to accept like commission on the side where they don't have to burn any of it, it's always going to be better for them from that standpoint. Whereas, and priority fees, they change. So like you could still get a transaction in the block with 0 priority fees. Whereas with the base fees, they're burned regardless. So you can't like not have that base fee burned. Whereas just setting the priority fee to 0 and paying the validator on the side, that's always going to be more profitable for them if they don't have to burn that fee, I think.
I could still take the side deal though, either way, right? Like, why wouldn't I?
I mean, if it's just baked in priority, if priority isn't burned at all, why would you? If it's
Oh,
just
'cause I
easier
could-
to just follow the.
I could get more money from the side deal. They're gonna.
I mean, yeah, but in that case, you might as well just follow priority fees. And if someone's paying a lot in priority fees, where it'd be more than the side deal, like if 100% of it goes to you, it doesn't really matter where it's from. They should really be treated equally, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, overclock. Go ahead.
I think I might have misunderstood the radium attack, but I think it was, if I understand, like what I thought it was you saying that validators could stuff their own transactions into the block that have contention with radium accounts, and then other people would need to place higher transaction fees to, get past your own transactions. So you're kind of like bidding up that market. But you could also do something where you just drop all transactions with a priority fee that isn't high enough. I mean, it's not like hidden as well, maybe, but
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Good point. Yeah. And I was just mostly trying to really understand the security aspects here, because when I just did a quick scan through that SIMD, the word security is only mentioned a few times, and there's no elaboration on it. It almost seems like it was ignored. And these are all valid points. Good stuff to think about.
Brian, just on that point, please comment that on the forum proposal as feedback to the author, and just in general, because these are really good conversations, and also the conversation on Discord. But ultimately, it'd be really good to have these thoughts formulated on the forum, so the author can respond, and that we have a record of what everyone's kind of thinking is, and what the kind of community brain is kind of processing relating to the topic. So we can always go back and read through that as well for relevance or understanding. A year or 2 years from now, we might really not remember what was happening in these conversations.
I reposted the forum link. So yeah, maybe I buried the lead a bit, but the forum link there is something that you should all go visit and read through and make sure you have a good understanding of the proposal. Then ideally leave your comments like like Michael mentioned. Yeah, conversation on tips. And I may have mentioned this earlier as well, but there is a channel in Discord to discuss this also. It's the Vote Full Prio Fee to Validators channel. So I think that's kind of where more active discussion is happening. And then once you have an opinion somewhat formulated, the forum would be a good place to post. Any more issues people want to bring up here? Yeah, Max, go ahead.
Yeah, hey everybody. Just to kind of harken back to where we were a year ago, I did some analysis on validator profitability, and that showed that something like 75% of the validators out there were not profitable at all. I know we hoped that $200 SOL and like this crazy amount of activity on chain will continue, but I think anything we can do to kind of make sure that the majority of validators are profitable, even if we go back to a regime where there's not as much on-chain activity, if the price of Solana went down again, I think that's good for the network as a whole. A lot of validators are still doing this as a side project. There's not 24/7 kind of people responsible. People aren't full-time. So I think anything we can do to kind of especially for the smaller validators, make sure that they're profitable if they only have stake from, let's say Jito or Marinade, which, these days you have to basically run 0% commission to get that stake. I think Solana Foundation Delegation program is really, really good these days. But, if you're kind of if you're a high performing validator and you're kind of just surviving on, liquid staking pools in the Solana Foundation, you can very easily kind of slip back into, the point where you're considering like, should I just shut this thing down? So, you know, it does read kind of greedy when we look at a proposal like this, but you know, let's just keep in mind that like the majority of the network is kind of around 150,000 souls staked. So those are the people that will, you know, potentially benefit from this a lot.
Yeah, Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, I think Max brings up something I've been thinking about, and I mentioned in Discord yesterday, and I think it's adjacent to what Overclock was talking about in terms of competitiveness. I mean, I'll just mention it here. If we're not done with SIMD 96, we could table it. But you know, the point of validator profitability is that all these income streams are proportionally tied to the level of stake a validator has. So, I just tweeted about this, but basically, like a small commission on a small amount of stake is hit a lot harder by any reduction in fees than a small commission on a large amount of stake. So, I think in terms of competitiveness, we do have to be thinking about whether or not we want independent validators in the set and what, will need to be done to keep them in the set over time. Because as the way the economics are going, as long as all the income streams are tied to, the level of stake a validator has, to Max's point, it gets harder and harder for independent lower stake validators to attract stake and stay competitive. And to Overclock's point, if there are other extenuating circumstances that add to those difficulties, then the days of this lower staked independent validators could be numbered. And that's why I keyed on what Zen said earlier, that the priority fees are also proportional to the stake a validator has. And I realize a lot of this is fundamental to proof of stake in general, but I think with Solana's growth, it's probably the first network that is really the first network where this is becoming, I don't want to say an issue, but something that needs to be addressed now if we want to maintain a healthy validator set, if you believe a healthy validator set includes independent validators.
Ryan, go ahead.
Yeah, I think we've all been thinking about this a lot lately. I think Helios's entry into the space has been good, and I think he's brought up a lot of good points that we have stake sitting at Coinbase and Kraken and Binance, and there's a lot of stake held by those folks, and they're not doing much for the network. But in the short term, they seem to be keeping their stake because it's like the low friction person or people that need custody. And so what ends up happening, though, is it's actually the knife fight is all the independent validators that are trying to be on parity. And so the folks that have other revenue streams, like an RPC provider or a DApp, yes, they should be operating, and yes, they should be attracting stake to help them have the level of service they need. But if it's a race to zero for all the independents, we're gonna contract our validator set almost certainly. The people that are barely making it now, if we take away more revenue streams or there's a pressure to cut commission, and rebate priority fees and block rewards, it's gonna be very, very hard for them to make it. So I don't know what the answer is. Like, I think the competitive landscape is going to go this direction, but I don't think everybody wants it to be 100 validators operated by RPCs and DApps. Like, that doesn't seem to be the expressed goal. I think folks like Mert, maybe we could talk to him about, like, hey, instead of just giving all that rebate to the stakers, maybe you think about funding other programs, fund an ecosystem grant, fund other things. Like, if you don't want to take the commission, but we should try to have revenue streams for independent validators, and by everybody cutting to zero and then cutting again and then now rebating, it's not going to work. And we have one of the larger validators, so we can make it work longer. But if you have like 100,000 stake, or you're trying to launch a new validator today, it's going to be very, very hard to make it a business. And it was up until December of last year, it was hard to make a business. And we're going to be kind of taking away further revenue streams.
Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, sorry, I'm going to kind of take a few steps back to SIMD 96. I just wanted to briefly mention one other component, which is more on the procedural side, is that for this vote, we're going to try using the Jito Merkle distributor tool. for distributing the voting tokens. The main difference is going to be that validators will need to claim their vote tokens the same as the Jito airdrop worked. The stake weight calculation and everything using a CSV file will still be the same. And I can publish a more detailed breakdown of how that would work. But if anyone had thoughts on that, I thought that would also be useful to maybe mention on this call. But I realized the conversation has shifted a bit into a different direction now.
Thank you, Michael. Austin, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing too that we need to take into account is, the smallest validators, like Ryan was saying, when they're first coming on, if they're very high performant, the only thing they're attracting without any sort of advertising is these liquid stake pools. And then these liquid stake pools that we also have to take into account, majority of them, specifically Marinade, has a rule, and I'm going to look exactly what it says, but I believe you can only have up to 4 times. Yeah. It's you cannot Marinade will not stake more than 4 times the current stake within that validator. So as these small validators continue to try to come on, it's just not feasible for them to have. I mean, they're going to know that they're not going to break even for a while. They're also requiring to be 0% commission to even be within the parameters to receive stake. So it's kind of fun. It's funny because it's kind of like, at what point are you going to be able to hit an ROI to raise your commission? And then, you have to attract that stake by running at a net loss for the consecutive amount of time, and then ensuring that you have enough stake outside of one specific pool to be able to get some of the biggest pools to rebalance, the 4 times the amount. So I just feel like if we can get these smaller validators to have a nice kick in the butt to, bring their stake up to help attract, these stake pools to consider, like staking with them. And I'm not sure if this is just a governance issue with specific stake pools, but, I think if we can somehow as a community figure out a way to assist these small validators, I believe it will be extremely helpful to the network for decentralization specifically.
Yep, Chris, go ahead.
To follow on that, the one point I'll make is that while the parameters, in some of the stake pools could be optimized, after a number of years of trying to fight this fight, I do feel like it's necessary to have in protocol sticks and carrots in order to do this if a network is serious about decentralizing, because the one thing I'm pretty convinced about is if we rely on human altruism when real money is changing hands, then that's a losing battle at this point. So I think in the near term, we can lobby for people to do things that are helpful. But I think in the longer term, if we do value a diverse validator set, we'll have to start thinking about in protocol ways to keep that set diverse.
And I think also, sorry, I know I didn't raise my hand, Tim, but I think also going back to respond to that, and this may be more of a foundation portion, but if we can somehow balance how long it takes to get foundation delegation to kind of bootstrap that to these new validators, I think that may help, at least get them breaking even, sooner. So and I'm not sure if, I know there are rules in place for a specific reason, so we don't flood, how many people are coming in. But I also think that, a potential rebalance of how many people are coming on board, because I think right now I ran the numbers, I want to say it was 2 days ago, and I think it was right around 19 months. Correct me if I'm wrong, Tim. Before, if we were to apply today, I think it's around 19 months before you would get stake.
I think
Yeah.
it's worth. Oh, go ahead, Tim.
I was just going to say, it depends on the call. There is a contributor queue that I'm sure he wants to plug. So
Yeah. So Austin, a big thing to keep in mind is we've created a new system for people to basically be onboarded pretty immediately, like within a week or two. And a big piece of this is almost kind of like proof of work. Like, we know that SFTP has difficulty with Sybils, and if there's a guaranteed way to make money, even for just a short amount of time, we know that it's going to be Sybil. It's just something that I don't think you can get around. So the point of this new contributor queue is like you post proof that you've contributed to Solana in some way, and that is something that you can't do 1000x. Like one person can't do a bunch of work. So in a way, it's like proof of work that hey, like as a Sybil resistance mechanism. But if you've done anything and you've got a project you can link to, it has users, you've done something within the community, or you've built something as a dev, then yeah, you should be able to start a validator within a week or two. Is my take. You have to prove yourself on testnet for at least 5 epochs, but then after that, the goal is to get you on and give you an opportunity to at least try to make a sustainable operation. Long term, I think the SFTP should be a system that looks more like an incubator, where we can help reduce the risk at the beginning, but not sustain you indefinitely. And the less critical the foundation is in keeping a healthy validator account, I think the better.
So Ben, in response to that, one, I wasn't aware of that program. Is there any way you could link information to that?
Yeah.
Two, if say a validator has been operating on mainnet for a sufficient period of time with low stake, is that, I guess, could that potentially be a parameter to avoid having to do another 5 epochs on testnet?
I mean, no, the testnet thing, just like it's a 10 days at most. That's honestly just probably going to be the shortest you can do.
Okay.
And
Yeah, if you could link some more information, that'd be super helpful, because I was not aware.
Yeah,
and
I want to make sure we get the people holding their hands up.
Yeah, just one quick point there. The requirement to run a testnet validator does not go away. So if you are added to SFTP, you still have to run a testnet validator.
Yep.
Michael, go ahead. I think you were next. Oh no, sorry, Zan maybe. Zan, then Michael.
Yeah, so I just want to briefly present a much more callous and I think potentially realistic viewpoint on what a validator set should consist of. I think a lot of people have this idea that that validators should just exist and people should just be able to run them. And honestly, I benefit from that. And it's very callous for me to say this because I know what a privileged position I happen to be in. But I think the healthiest proof of stake network is one in which every participant has actual dedicated value in that network. So I think a network in which there are 6,000 apps and every single app runs a validator is a much healthier network, because every app has a vested interest in being there. And the only reason for this giant proof of stake network is so that they can all participate together in a way to cooperatively create a transaction-based network where every single one of them trusts that 2/3 of all the others are honest and that it's all going to work. So I think that validators as sort of like their own little business is maybe something that happens to exist right now, but I think in the eventuality of a truly healthy proof of stake network, that's that's just like a historical footnote. And I think that my job should and will go away eventually as a purely validator operator, and we're replaced by people that actually have more vested interest in the network. And these very large institutions that we mentioned, the Coinbases, they're actually doing a lot for the network. They're doing a heck of a lot for Solana, if at the very least sequestering a huge amount of SOL that isn't moving around and is kind of like keeping SOL, the amount of liquid SOL sort of in the margins, which keeps everyone likes the price to stay high. If all that stuff got dumped, it would have a major impact on prices. So anyway, that's all I want to say.
Thanks, Dan.
Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I pressed the wrong button before. On the point of validator profitability overall and small validators, I just wanted to raise a data point. When I first started on Mainnet, and for a long time, the narrative 1 to 2 years ago was kind of that you need 50,000 SOL to break even, right? Like 50,000 SOL and a 10% commission was kind of the break-even point that was like the ballpark being thrown around. And I've just had a quick look and done some rough maths, and it looks like that point has come down to 35,000 now, which is about a 30% improvement. if you keep a 10% commission and 0% Jito commission, now if you lower your commission to 4% and do 10% Jito, then at 50,000, you're making a nice profit and you're competing on commission as well. So I just want to bring that up as a kind of a counterpoint and say that things have improved in terms of competitiveness and profitability for small validators. It doesn't mean they can't improve more, but things have also moved in the right direction in the last year or two.
Do you know how that changed the capital requirement? The capital requirement also changed? If the number of SOL also changed?
So what do you mean by capital requirement?
Oh, well, I heard that the number of SOL required dropped from 50 to 35,000, taking into account the price, the amount of capital to acquire the 35,000.
Yeah.
Is it lower than it would have been to acquire the 50,000?
Well, I mean, in this case, no one's acquiring it, right? It's third-party stake. If you're self-staking, then it's like 4,000 SOL, because you can keep all the commission and all the rewards. So these numbers are all for third-party stake. So the cost of acquisition is kind of irrelevant because you're not buying it.
Yeah, and it's more about SOL. Yeah, and a lot of that's driven via block rewards, right? That big drop is from a huge increase in block rewards, and denominated in SOL. And the more those are, the more total paths for validators to create value via like stake weighted QoS mechanisms or Jito or transaction flows of any kind. I think we will continually seeing ways for these validators to give those back to their stakers, but also like new ways to generate income. Rex, I think your hand was up most recently.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. So this consolidation thing happened exactly this way in the Cosmos ecosystem, where you had like Binance and Coinbase like holding large amounts of the network but not participating. And I kind of recommended a couple different approaches, and one was algorithmically setting a Congress and Senate with some cutoff. Sorry, where like maybe the lower 50% gets some kind of privileged voting multiplier, and maybe there's some kind of like power level decay where it's like if you're in the network and you're not participating, maybe you've got like some kind of almost inflation of your voting power that happens over time as you don't participate. So then there'd be like kind of a built-in activity benefit on the voting side, and then there'd be treating the lower 50% of validators as effectively the House of Commons or Congress, and allowing them like maybe initially more voting or some kind of like algorithmically set initial voting power or voting privileges on some areas. So we definitely saw this exact same thing in the Cosmos ecosystem. I just want to throw that out there.
Any place to go to see kind of the discussions on that? I'd be interested to just read through that.
Yeah,
If I could jump,
yep.
Rex, if I could just jump in real quick, did you see negatives as these institutional started sucking up all the Cosmo? Like, was there, besides they weren't participating, when the small validators were pushed out, what kind of effects did you see from that?
Jacob Gadakian, who's kind of starting to move into the Solana ecosystem, has talked about this a lot, and maybe we should get him on some of these calls because he's had a lot of opinions. I mean, they had a lot of discussion about this exact point, and he was one of the ones complaining the most because he was operating a smaller validator, Notional, and they do a lot of open source contribution to Cosmos, which is one of the reasons why I'm interested in getting him into Solana, because I know they do a lot. Like they built these they built a library called Spammy for doing like fuzzing the network and so on. So he has a lot of opinions on this, on how to properly reward ecosystem validators that do a lot of open source work but are on the smaller side. So I might have to rely on him. Maybe I can introduce him to you guys because he's an expert at this.
Thanks, Rex. We're running pretty short on time, so it might just be Ryan, Michael, then finish it up. So go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, I'll try to be quick. Yeah, see, I definitely agree with like the long-term vision of like apps running their own, and I think that's going to be, I think is very likely. I guess it's like, how do we bridge to that future? Because if we, sort of nuke the small validator economics now for the next 2 years before we have all these robust, healthy dApps functioning, we might have a much, much smaller validator set. So like, I think it's in this time when, the dApps themselves are not profitable. We don't have that, like, we don't have hundreds of them live. If it just consolidates down to a few validators, that's not gonna be a good situation either. So it's like, what do we do in the interim to support these as we maybe bridge to that type of future?
Michael, go ahead.
Cool. I'll keep this really brief. I just want to talk about the APY component and the kind of race to zero that that's creating. And I think a lot of that is being driven by stake pools because in a way they have to be more algorithmic and data driven in their decision making. So they have to look at kind of the on-chain stats. But if we look at validators overall, we see that a lot of validators are able to attract stake and sustain stake, even charging a commission 2%, 3, 4, 5, even more percent than that. So I think this whole narrative that APY is, that commission has to be zero is maybe a bit overweighted because of the presence of mind that stake pools have in the validator community. They have a lot of presence and are able to influence a lot of validators. But if we look at the overall staking ecosystem, they represent less than 10% of total stake at the moment. And I don't know that all stake is that sensitive to commission. So it might also be a point to kind of maybe try and talk to the stake pools and say, let's see if we can find a kind of medium ground where we say, okay, 3, 4, 5% commission is also reasonable and sustainable.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think we're at time, so we'll leave it at that. But thank you, everyone. Great discussion today. And remember to go take a look at the forum post for SIMD 96. The next meeting will be on the second Thursday of June for the Solana Validator discussion. The community-led discussion will be remind me, Chris, the third or fourth Thursday of the month.
Be in 2 weeks.
2 weeks. 2 weeks from now.
So not next week, but the week after. Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. See you soon.
Thanks, everybody.